I came over from Serbia at age 13 with my mother. My older brother, who was 15 years older than me, had lived in America for a few years and sent for us. My mom wouldn't be staying, although at the time I wasn't aware of that. Anyway, we landed in New York City and the plan was for my brother to come get us. However, my niece decided to come early, and my brother's wife went into labor shortly before we landed. My brother couldn't leave his wife, so he asked a co-worker of his, they drove cabs, to pick us up in NYC and drive us to New Jersey, where he and my sister-in-law lived. When we got to NYC, we waited in customs for what seemed like forever. We looked for my brother but didn't see him. This was the early 90s and cell phones weren't common, and even if they were, my mom and I didn't have one. We panicked a bit when we didn't see my brother or my sister-in-law. Suddenly, we heard our names being called and saw a tall man. He introduced himself in perfect Serbian and explained he was a good friend of my brother's, then told us about the baby. He said he'd be driving us the 2 hours from the airport to my brother's home. My mom relaxed and they happily began to converse about the baby, my brother, and America. I, however, just felt off. This guy gave me bad vibes, and regardless of my brother's friendship with him, I felt distrustful of him. We drove for a good hour and a half when he announced he was going to take us for breakfast. We hadn't eaten in over 15 hours, so we were starving by then. We pulled up to a house and my mom and I were confused. He insisted cheerfully that his wife was cooking us breakfast and that afterward we'd drive the rest of the way to the hospital to see my family. My mom shushed me when I whispered that something didn't feel right and told me we needed to be grateful for the hospitality. We were led into the house. It was dark, dank, and dirty. Suddenly, I think my mom finally got nervous and started insisting he take us to my brother. That's when the guy grabbed my mom by the wrist. He told her he needed a wife to take care of him and his house, and when he heard my brother tell others at work that she'd be coming to stay, he knew he'd found a wife. I was a scrawny little kid at the time and I tried pushing him off my mom, but he hit me so hard I saw stars. At that point, we were terrified. Neither of us spoke English, we only knew my brother's home number and he was at the hospital. In Serbia, you don't dial 911, so even if I could, I didn't know that's how you'd call the police. He told my mom she was to clean and cook for him, and then he took me to the basement where I was locked in what I now know is called the laundry room. I banged, cried, and yelled, but it was so far down in the basement that everything was muffled. For a week, we were kept in his home. He'd lock us in the basement after my mom cooked him breakfast and let us out when he came home at 4. If we had to use the restroom, there was a bathroom, but that was it. Just a bathroom and the laundry room. It was freezing cold down there, and even huddling together under a blanket did nothing. One morning, I discovered a small window by climbing on some boxes. I managed to open it, and my mother insisted I squeeze through. I didn't want to leave her, and besides, how would I get help? I couldn't read or speak the language. Still, I didn't want to live that way for the rest of my life, so I did as she asked. I ran once I got out, and I'm sure I was a sight. A scrawny boy with no shoes, wearing only shorts and a t-shirt in the middle of November. That's what saved us. Several concerned neighbors tried to get me to come to them, but I wouldn't. I was terrified. I kept trying to get them to follow me. The police were called, and a very nice officer tried to get me to go into his car. Then I saw the man who had taken us pull up in his taxi. He saw the cops and took off. That's when I made a run back to his house to get my mom. Needless to say, the officer and his partner ran after me and my mother was rescued. It took another 4 hours for them to find someone who spoke our language, so we could explain what happened. A warrant was issued for the man. My brother was contacted. His friend had told him we never showed up, and my brother had been frantically calling back home to Serbia trying to find us. He drove up to get us and gave the cops information about his supposed friend so they could find him. They never did. Back then, before 9/11, it was easy for someone to disappear. The experience made me distrustful of people and their intentions for a long time. My mom grew homesick and ended up going back to Serbia. I stayed, finished school, and eventually became a cop in the military, thanks to the kind officer who helped me all those years ago. I think about the man who kept us prisoner every now and then, and honestly, I wouldn't mind meeting him now. I just don't think he'd want to meet me. This situation occurred when my son was 4 years old. This time I am 100% sure that my kid prevented something horrible from happening to me. It turned into an episode of Law & Order, with a terrifying ending. For background, I live in Milwaukee, which has the honor of being the most racially segregated city in the country. It's a cool city overall, but we have a really shitty inner city with a ton of poverty, violence, and gang activity. At the time this happened, I was living in a sort of in-between area. Not the ghetto, but not a super nice area either. I was a 22-year-old single mom. I lived in a ground floor apartment on one of the main streets. I parked in the back alley behind the building. My front door faced the street, and I also had a side door, with a walk running between my building and the one next door. I got home in the middle of the afternoon on a Saturday with my kid. As we drove down the alley to get to my parking spot, I saw a guy in a hoodie sort of lurking around by my parking spot. It was weird because it was warm outside and he had his hood up, but there were a bunch of gangster wannabe kids in the neighborhood, so whatever. It was definitely an odd place to just be standing, though. As I got close to the building and started pulling into my parking spot, he turned around and started walking toward the street, past my side door. He definitely left because I arrived. I figured he was smoking a blunt or something. I didn't think anything of it. I got my son and some bags out of the car. I went the same way the guy had just taken, to my side door. I didn't see him at all. My son and I went inside, and I was in the process of putting stuff down when my doorbell rang. I wasn't expecting anyone, and I immediately thought it was this guy. Being young and naive, I answered the front door. It was the same guy, still with his hood up. He immediately smiled at me, but not in a super friendly way, more of a leer. He looked to be about 16 with cornrows and a fake gold grill that was studded with little fake diamonds. I regretted opening the door, but here I was, so I went with it. "Hi." He kept staring at me and said nothing. At this point, I saw another kid in a hoodie pacing behind him on the sidewalk and looking at us. I was quickly realizing that this was not a good situation. My son, who I had momentarily forgotten about, came up behind me. He did the shy kid thing where he stood behind me and poked his head out from behind my butt to look at the guy. Hoodie dude looked at him for a good couple of seconds and then back at me. "Yo, is Danielle around?" "I don't know who that is. Maybe try the other door." I gestured to my neighbor's door to my left. "You sure?" "Yeah, sorry." And he left, walking in the opposite direction of my neighbor's door. Hoodie dude nor two followed him. I thought it was really weird that they didn't even try to check next door for Danielle. I thought the whole thing was really weird. My boyfriend got to my apartment a few minutes later, and I was glad to see him. He had a really old Jeep that he always parked out front on the main street. When he went out to get something from his car shortly after he arrived, it was gone. Car theft was a pretty common thing in this neighborhood, but stealing it from the main street in broad daylight was pretty ballsy. So we called the cops, filed a report, the whole nine. I told the cop about the hoodie dudes since it seemed like it could be important. I was able to give a good description of the guy who came to my door asking for Danielle. I had no idea if it was relevant, but the fact that the Jeep was stolen shortly after these guys were around seemed pretty relevant. That's where the story ended until 2 days later. I got a call from a different cop with the downtown, Main precinct. He told me they had found the Jeep and, other than the ignition, it wasn't damaged. He asked if I could come downtown to do a lineup, to see if I could identify the people who had knocked on my door right before the Jeep got taken. That was weird, a lineup for a stolen car, but I agreed. He asked if I could come down in a couple of days. Also weird that they wouldn't want me to do it right away, but I was mostly focused on the fact that doing a lineup was pretty fucking cool. So I went to the downtown precinct a couple of days later. The way this went seemed sort of unorthodox, but it was what it was. 2 detectives took me into a dark room, where a woman in her 50s was sitting with a young woman in a wheelchair. The young woman's lower leg was in a giant cast with this whole metal contraption surrounding it, with maybe a dozen metal rods going into the cast itself. At this point, I had no idea what the fuck was happening. The detectives instructed us that we weren't to say anything during the lineup, except if we wanted the guys to turn around again or whatever, and that we couldn't talk to each other at all. We ended up having to wait in the room for almost an hour in the dark, awkwardly not speaking. They explained it was taking more time than anticipated to get 12 guys from the jail over to the precinct. Finally, we got started. They did 2 lineups and gave us forms to mark 1, 2, 3, 4, 5, or 6. There was a large window in front of us, and they explained that the guys couldn't see us. They turned the lights on in the room behind that window and brought each guy in individually. I couldn't identify anyone in the first lineup. I sort of felt bad actually, but I couldn't. The second lineup started and I didn't recognize guys 1, 2, or 3. Number 4 came out though, and I immediately recognized the dude who had knocked on my door. He didn't have his stupid grill anymore, but it was definitely the guy. After the second lineup was done, they brought the other 2 women into the hallway and told me to stay put. After a few minutes, they came back to get me. The detectives asked if I recognized anyone, and I told them I was sure about number 4 in the second lineup, but couldn't identify anyone in the first lineup. I had gathered by this point that Hoodie Dude 2 had likely been in the first lineup, but I hadn't gotten a good look at him when he was pacing on the sidewalk. They had me sign 2 forms, one for each lineup, with the second form identifying number 4 as Hoodie Dude 1. When I gave the forms back, the detective told me they could explain what was actually going on now that the lineup was done. Good, because I was confused as fuck by this point. He explained that number 4 was indeed one of the guys they arrested with my boyfriend's Jeep. The guys had stolen the Jeep and driven to a nearby part of town, into a quiet and lily-white neighborhood. They came across a young couple unloading groceries from their car. The young woman with the leg contraption was the female half of that couple. They parked the stolen Jeep behind the couple, got out, and immediately shot them both. They shot the woman in the leg and shot the young man in the dick. He was still in the hospital in bad condition, which was why he wasn't there. The older woman was the girl's mom and had brought her from the hospital to do the lineup. The reason it was delayed a couple of days was because she had emergency surgery to try to fix the damage to her leg. The guys didn't demand anything from the couple or take anything from them after the shooting. They just immediately shot them. The young woman managed to remember the license plate number of the Jeep, and they were apprehended in a corner store when a cop saw the stolen car parked outside shortly after the shooting. The shooters were both teenagers but were being charged as adults. One of them had stupidly talked a bit before lawyering up and told a detective it was a gang initiation. They had to shoot a white person. That was the price of admission. They had stolen my boyfriend's car after taking the bus out to the street I lived on. They figured it would be easier to get away if they had wheels. The detectives were pretty sure I had been the original target of opportunity, but couldn't explain why they hadn't gone through with it. I knew why. It was because he saw my kid peeking out from behind me. They told me I might have to testify if the case went to court, and that I'd hear from the DA's office when they needed me. A couple of months later, one of the detectives called and told me the Hoodie Dudes had pleaded out to attempted murder charges in exchange for reduced time. The guy who got shot in the dick survived. I didn't ask how many years, but I assume they're probably still in prison 13 years later. As an ironic postscript, my boyfriend had the same Jeep stolen from the same spot in front of my apartment about 4 months later, also in broad daylight. That time, they didn't find it right away. He was staying over at my place weeks later when he got a call around 2 a.m. from the MPD arson unit. They had torched it and left it in the middle of the street in a notoriously violent area of the city. I moved after that. Someone I went to high school with lived a fake life on the internet using my identity, without me knowing for years. First off, this story happened almost 10 years ago. I'll jump right in because it's long. I got home from work one day and logged into Facebook to find a message from someone I didn't know. It was too long ago to remember verbatim what was said, but it was along the lines of, "Hey Lot Lizard, I know you have no idea who I am, but I've been trying to decide what to do for a few days and figured I had to let you know what's been going on. Someone has been catfishing me using your identity for over 2 years, and I just found out about it last week." The sender of the message was clearly pretty shaken up and, understandably, was experiencing a mix of emotions. According to her, she had met the imposter online a little over 2 years prior to writing this, and they had been engaged in a pretty intimate long-distance relationship for the majority of that time. The imposter had created a Facebook account and, over time, reposted almost all of my photos with their own captions. This included a good amount of art I'd drawn that they took credit for. They also created fake profiles for a good number of my close family members and friends so they could comment on photos of themselves and make the profile seem legitimate. The funniest part to me is that although most things in my real life seemed to be mirrored in this fake profile, I, a straight male, was instead portrayed as trans. I think the main reason for this was that the sender of the message and the imposter actually spoke on the phone, and the imposter turned out to be female, so she needed a reason to justify her more feminine-sounding voice. The sender was understandably both angry and creeped out and wanted to find the catfish. She started asking me a lot of questions about my life, phrasing them like, "Is your sister's name this?" and "Did you go to this high school?" Some of these were clearly things anyone could find from a quick browse of my profile. But then she asked, "Is so-so person your best friend?" That struck me as odd because despite this person being my closest friend and someone I spend the most time with, we barely have any Facebook photos together, and most of them are from a long time ago. Then she asked, "Were you adopted and are your half-siblings named this and that?" That sealed the deal for me, since I knew for a fact I'd never posted about being adopted online. The sender already suspected that this person knew me in real life, but that confirmed it for me. The sender had contacted me shortly after confronting the imposter for the first time. I guess after 2 years she'd finally become suspicious of the fact that the imposter wouldn't show her face. I have no idea how it took that long to figure out she was being played, but I'm glad she finally gave the ultimatum, "Show your face, or I'm cutting you off." I'm pretty sure this is when the imposter admitted to being a catfish and confessed that she'd been using the identity of someone she had a crush on in high school before hanging up. I was given the URL so I could look through the profile myself. It stayed up for about 2 days after I saw it before everything was removed. It was definitely bizarre. The imposter had posted more than I ever had on Facebook, and it genuinely seemed like she'd lived a pretty involved double life online as me. Almost everyone I'd posted photos with on my real profile had a corresponding fake profile created, complete with enough content to be genuinely convincing so they could be tagged and validate the new photos. Some of these profiles even seemed to have made their own real friends, and I wondered if any of them were used to facilitate even more online dating deception. Either way, the amount of time and effort spent fabricating this alter ego's online presence was pretty shocking. While I was crawling down this Facebook rabbit hole, the sender was looking through my real profile. After a while, she messaged me asking, "Did you take these photographs?" and showed me what I remember as a black and white photo of a barn or something. I hadn't taken it. That was strange, since everything else on the fake profile originated with me, and she noticed the discrepancy. We both tried reverse image searching with no luck. Then, either through a stroke of genius, or somewhat suspiciously, I honestly couldn't tell, she decided to reverse the fake phone number the imposter had listed on the profile. A Google search led to a landline registered to the home address of a girl I'd gone to high school with. I was Facebook friends with the real imposter's profile, so we both went snooping and found the photo she had claimed I'd taken. That pretty much confirmed it for me. I'm sure there were more indicators for the sender as well, but I can't remember them now. I thought about messaging the imposter for a while, but decided it probably wouldn't lead to anything good. At the time, my thoughts were definitely, let's not meet. I talked a few times with the sender just to decompress a bit, but I mostly wanted to distance myself from the situation. I also had some suspicions about the sender, wondering if it might be the imposter's last-ditch effort to talk to me. However, once it was all over, the sender also seemed eager to leave everything behind, so maybe not. Either way, it was a really strange experience. I felt mostly freaked out and violated, though there was a small part of me that felt flattered. I had a lot of mixed emotions. The weirdest part is that I'm a really approachable person and would have been willing to talk and probably be friends if this person had just approached me honestly. I'm still not sure whether this was done out of obsession, or if she simply saw me as a suitable image to base a fabricated persona on. I remember talking to her maybe twice throughout high school, and didn't really know her beyond the fact that she was a quiet, hipster-type girl. If either person involved reads this, I'd be happy to talk now. It's been years, and I've gone from being very put off to constantly wondering why this person chose me, out of so many more attractive or interesting people online, to base another life on. According to the sender, she probably spent more time online pretending to be me than actually living her own life. I've had my own tumultuous history with addiction, and plenty of my own escapes, which is why it's always fascinated me that someone would want to live someone else's life as a way of escaping their own. At the end of the day, the person pretending to be me had no idea that I spent a lot of my time daydreaming about being someone else too. I guess it just goes to show that no matter how much you wish you were someone else, That person probably has plenty of their own reasons for wanting to escape their own demons as well.